HiSec Buyback offers a 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
Hello and welcome back to Talking in Stations. I'm your host, Rahne, and I'm joined by Artemis, our lovely engineer in the background running the stream. And we have two guests today. We have Oz and Angry Mustache. Oz, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, I'm Oz. I'm your regular Eve market guy. I've been streaming and talking about the Eve markets for the last 3 years on Twitch, and you might have seen my trading guides on the Eve Academy. So I like talking everything trading and markets in Eve Online. So I'm excited about talking about the MER today.
Alrighty, and Angry?
Hey, I'm Angry Mustache. I primarily make spreadsheets about the MER, and I'm not nearly as good at the trading or making money part as Odds. But the spreadsheets are good enough. It got me on the CSM. So right now, the week before, we just finished our summit with CCP in Reykjavik.
All right, awesome. And just in general, small talk, how was it? Did you have a lot of fun? Get a lot done?
Yeah, I think we got a lot done. I was really impressed by CCP's hospitality, and us stupid Americans stole about $1,000 of Icelandic healthcare. So that was pretty good as well.
Getting the true European experience. I love it.
Indeed.
Alrighty, so today we are going to be discussing the MER. This is the kind of stuff that I don't quite understand, but Oz and Angry understand quite well. So you guys can go in depth as you want, and then when you get too confusing, I will stop you and ask for clarity, because I definitely do not know as much as you. But MER came out, so it would have been the MER for January. I guess at the highest level, were there any surprises, like anything that kind of shocked you or you weren't expecting?
I can jump in there, and Angry, maybe you can. I know you have a big opinion on what's happening in Pochven as well, but I think the big story that we saw in January and that we were waiting for is that CCP, after nerfing the spawn rate of Observatory flashpoints in Pochven, and we saw a huge drop in activity and an exodus of just stuff, economic value from Pochven in December. They had a turnaround and went about halfway back. And what we're seeing now is that yes, activity did return, but not nearly as much as the levels we had before, which is all right, because we all agree the levels before were kind of insane in terms of ISK making in Pochven, and also not distributed across enough people. However, what I was looking forward to seeing is the import-export numbers again. And Angry, I don't know if you have some inside information or if Estimate has answered you yet, but the import-export numbers for Pochven seem to just say 0 in the MER
yes.
for January. So, yeah. Do you have any other information?
I don't have anything that you don't have, but I'll say is that generally, when people get rug pulled as hard as it did in Pochven V1, so like in the first iteration of the nerf it was a very high magnitude nerf and very sudden. And when that kind of thing happens, people lose trust in the ability for CP to maintain stability in a region. So they pull out. And now when you're trying to get back into the pool, people are more cautious because they think, there's a chance we get rug pulled again. So what's happening right now is just going from import-export is that no major back to Pochven event has happened. So the farming is being done by the people who never left. And from what I've been told by the residents there, the reduced cooldown even with the reduced cooldown, it's still a handful of groups, very multi-boxer biased, that are doing the majority of the farming. So the change had the effect of pushing up the ISK printed out of Pochven, but it did not have the effect. Actually, I would have to look. That data is not available, but I would say from what people living there are saying is that it did not achieve the goal of better distribution of that ISK.
No, I think you're right. What I'm also referring to, Angry, though, is that the number in the MER is actually 0 for imports and 0 for exports. So it's not just that.
Oh, that's
you know,
okay. That I have not actually noticed.
Yeah, I noticed
should
yesterday.
Go ask to correct that.
I did. Yeah, I did. I for in Estimate's defense, I asked him today on a Sunday, so I'm sure he'll get back.
Yeah,
Knowing Estimate, he's very good about getting back. So we might see a fix in that, and I'm sure it's an error. And you know, I was just very curious, looking for that number. That would have been nice to have.
Yeah. So out of like observation of the way they do the MER, if a region gets skipped, it's usually around the O to P alphabet. Like usually you'll see like if you remember the previous MERs, it's like Almost goes missing or Paragon Soul goes missing. So I'm wondering if it's like it's a concatenation of two queries after one of them runs too long, and the union part happens at the O to P alphabet range. I'm pretty sure they sort it alphabetically.
Tell me you understand spreadsheets and programming without telling me you understand spreadsheets and programming. But yeah, that would be very specific. That would be a much better explanation than the tinfoil hat explanation that they don't want to say how many people have left Podshot since then. But it looks like people were returning anyway, so we would like to see that. I'm sure we'll get that number next
Yeah.
time.
And as for the number, so it seems like it was for sure that during the 90-minute cooldown that Pokemon was being farmed to capacity or very close to it. So like the moment a site respawns, people are on it. And after the 35-minute change, it seems like that's still the case because the ISPline day-to-day variance is very flat. So like in space where the capacity is significantly higher than utilization, you see spikes on the weekend, and you don't see that in Pokemon. So which means that either that it's still at very close to utilization max, and I'm not making any accusations, but it seems like some people are very, very dedicated to it. So like they're on it 24/7.
Yeah, looks like it for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Rin.
Oh, I was going to say, so I know a lot of folks were very upset when the Observatory flashpoint changed, and now it's like, okay, CCP went back on it, but we're not really able to see the impact of that, right? Like we can't say, oh, are people going back into Poshman?
We can.
We can't.
Yes.
Oh, even without the import export. Okay.
It's not as visible in the MER release itself, but it is visible in the data files. Like it's not included because the graph does not go down to the daily level for destruction and ISK faucet. But yesterday on the Meta Show, I did make a graph showing the daily Pokemon levels of payout and destruction, and there was an immediate downturn, like within 1 day of the initial change, and within I think 2 to 3 days of the change to 35 minutes, you see the payout line go up to about 7.5 trillion per month, and the destruction line goes up about 50% as well.
So at least more people fighting as they're farming and whatnot.
Yeah, that is definitely happening.
Right. No, that's good.
At least more is made. I hope it's also more people, but it's a bit more destruction and is made as well. Yeah, for sure. Besides the Pochven issue, I don't know, Angry, if you wanted to say anything else about Pochven?
I think I'm good as far as talking about Pokemon is. It's usually been sort of beat to death, but I'll just say that we told CCP that the community would prefer no cooldown and lower payout per site if CCP is worried about the amount of IS being printed, because what they want is the no cooldown constant fighting. But the payout per site is actually at a point where you can replace a fleet after doing just one site. So like Ishtars and Vedmax, for example, one site pays for the fleet itself, so you're not exactly worried about whelping it. People don't think that's necessarily a good thing because it makes losses a bit too meaningless. Those two, but like as an example of those are fleets you can run Pokemon with, and they cost less than the site itself.
Yeah, it's actually like outrageous how easy it is to make ISK there. I remember we would do it with PL, and we'd go for like an hour or two, and we'd all make like 1 billion each, if not more. And then it's even better. The one thing I do like about Poshman is the way it's all gated, but it's really easy to get fights. So like I think that like really enthralls people. Like with other, like if you think of like incursions or abyssals, people aren't like, hey guys, I'm gonna go do this PvE and then I'm gonna PvP afterwards. Nobody thinks about that except in Poshvin. So it's like really, really unique in that aspect. And I hope CCP continues to make changes to keep it healthy, because I think it's really good for the game.
I think they've shown that it's an important region for them, just based on the speed at which they implemented changes for it over the last few months.
Yeah, so think about it. It's that change only took a month and a half. DBS took a year and a half. Like some other changes that have killed areas of space were never even reverted.
Yeah, I think wormholes would kill for that type of attention that Poshvin is getting.
Are you sure though? Because if you look at the wormhole commodities graph, you might see something that might cause CCP to become a bit concerned.
So speaking of that, I have this graph up in the background here. And this is commodity faucets over time. And there's two big things. One thing is what Angry is referring to, I believe, right there is this huge spike in sleeper components that we're seeing this month. So this is close to 1 trillion a day, right? In terms of a faucet, this is huge and at an all-time high. If the other thing that you can see from this graph is the insane amount of overseer personal effects, so that the Christmas or New Year's holiday event dropped and continues to drop from year to year. You can see the spike every single year in December, January. This blue spike right here of overseer personal effects is what the commodity that drops, and it's sold back to NPC buy orders, and therefore it just generates a huge amount of ISK every year that increases the money supply in the game. So this is this blue line right here. Yes, everyone's really happy about it that is running the event, but also that's a huge inflation risk right there, because you're dumping a ton.
Has told us they think is actually a good paradigm, because you have to do something different to do the New Year events. And that gets people out of their comfort zone and into other places. Now, from what I've also seen, though, is that not a lot of things actually die from these holiday events, because everyone's just busy running the sites, and you can do them in very cheap ships. So, like, people don't really put the effort into camping or killing the people who run these holiday sites. So that's up to CCP to decide whether they want these things to be to get more people killed. But at the moment, they say they are happy with the paradigm of a lot of is coming in through events that people do have to do something different for.
I think it's also good to point out that because of these Christmas events, they're good for folks who are just like, I don't know, who can't do things like running Poshvin. They're like the new players trying something out, like, hey, I want to mess around, and then they can kind of learn and grow through this kind of stuff. So I'm okay with that. Like if you compare it to say like wormhole money making or Poshvin money making, where it's like high SP, I'm assuming like you have to have like a bit more of a brain than like a new bro, where compared to like Christmas, where anyone and their mom can jump into like a frigate and try it out.
But one interesting thing is that if you notice that if we go back to the commodity is for faucet graph for a moment, is that there's a very strong replacement effect from the event. So you'll look is that wormhole dips immediately after the event starts, and for the duration of the event, it's depressed. And then the moment the event ends is when you see that big spike in wormholes. Because event's over, back to C5 farming, and you can see that dip in other areas of space as well. If you go to the one below, you'll see that, which is top 10 sinks and faucets. You'll see that ratting also dips during the event. So if you hit that line, you'll see that during the event, ratting also dips, and then it comes. And then once the event ends, it comes back.
The dip is not as, obviously in the sum of it, it still generates way more ISK. And what I'm wondering though is that it still looks like after the event, it's not only it came back, but wormhole loot or wormhole farming came back bigger than ever. Yeah.
Now I'm not sure why. However, I think there might be a data issue on December 31st. I think CCP traditionally had some issues getting the 31st day of the month into the MER. It happened a year ago. It didn't happen for the second half of 2022, and sorry, it didn't happen for the second half of 2021 and 2022. But I would need to go. I need to go download data and see if the data on December 31st is artificially low. And now we get it. It's New Year's Day, and a lot of people are spending time celebrating instead of playing Eve, like permanently alone losers. But that dip on December 31st does look a bit artificial in terms of. Oh, that's not from events. That's from the free Omega week. So how this money supply graph works is that if you log in, you're on it for an indeterminate period of time, but we're thinking 90 days is like the guess. So all the people who got the free week of Omega came back, logged in, and if they haven't been active for like a year or more, their ISK would disappear off this money supply graph. But if they log in because of the free Omega, their ISK reappears. So that spike is not because of the holiday event. It's too big for that, because there's like over 100 trillion spike. So
you're talking about the money supply right now, or
yeah, the graph shown right now, the money supply.
Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah, yeah, that's not because of events. That's because of the free Omega.
I gotcha. So players come back and then maybe they don't play again. So then that's the drop off. Is that what you're saying?
So we've been told publicly that the biggest source of drop off money supply is people going AFK.
Yeah,
and you'll see that during, I believe, blackout. Yeah, that's blackout right there. Some people quit the game permanently because of blackout.
Okay, I see that. Okay.
So we actually, if you can, Artemis, if you can pull up my screen real quick, I can show you something right here. We have someone who's nice enough to dump the MER numbers into Power BI. If you're a business user, you'll know what Power BI is every month. And with that, we can do a little bit of our own analysis without it being too difficult. And so what we can see from that data is that we can see the breakout between the active ISK delta, the faucets, and the sinks over time. That's what Angry was referring to right now when he was talking about. The active ISK delta is the difference in money supply that we don't see from sinks and faucets. So if you think about the money supply in EVE Online, like all the ISK that is available, you see all these faucets, right? The bounties and the overseer personal effects, all the blue loot, red loot. You see that side of it, and you see the sinks, which is your broker fees, your sales tax, and everything that goes out of the game. The thing the mystery thing in between is called the active ISK delta in the monthly economic report, and that comprises two main things. One is, as Angry just said, one is the people becoming active and inactive. So typically after somebody is inactive for 3 months, then their ISK gets removed from this money supply graph. So if a lot of people leave the game, then the money supply drops, as seen right there exactly. If a lot of people come back that were inactive, like in November, that big spike in November that we saw, then that's uprising, that is an expansion coming in, or free Omega, all that stuff. And so we did see a big spike of people coming back in November, but then ever since then we've had a negative active ISK delta again. And so if it's not people coming back, then it's the second part of what comprises that active ISK delta, and that is GM actions. So that's bots being banned, for example, and other things that GMs could do to remove accounts from the game. And so, interestingly enough, in the month after, in December, in the month after everyone came back for the expansion and free Omega, we did see a large negative active ISK delta, and that would be too soon for the people leaving again that just came, because it would take 3 months for their ISK to be removed from that graph again. And so it seems like they had a lot of GM actions, as I would call it.
And this is not NDA, and I can sort of back that up, which is that CCP security is more on the ball than they have been before, and we could physically see that during the summit. We can't tell you what they do, but we can tell you that they are better at chasing down botnets and banning networks than they were before significantly.
There's a comment
Yeah.
in chat saying, I didn't think CCP added ISK from bans from bots on the MER. Is there a way that they filter out like bots being banned and whatnot?
No, the activist delta, as Odd said, does include GM actions. So that counts. So whenever a ban happens, that happens. Although I have to run. I have an appointment coming up in 5 minutes that I have to get to. So unfortunately, thank you all for having me here. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you, Angry. We appreciate your insight.
Rahne, we can pivot a little bit to Plex for Good if you want.
Yeah.
Because that not only is that a new thing, and you can I'll let you introduce it, but that also has some interesting market impacts that I'd like to comment as well.
Yeah, no, that would be really good. I don't know. Oh yeah, Artemis has it on screen. So there was a recent earthquake, I believe, in both Syria and Turkey. We do have EVE players over there. I saw them all on Twitter asking CCP for a Plex for Good, and CCP actually said, you know what, you're right. We should do a campaign for this. And so CCP actually launched the Plex for Good campaign. So I think between now / a few days ago all the way until the 20th, I think is the latest they can go because the folks need the money ASAP. You can contract your Plex to a character in game. I believe Artemis is going to show it. So if you have any spare Plex, maybe you have spare ISK or you're not really playing, feel free to log in, buy some Plex, and contract that over. CCP then removes that Plex from the game, and then they take the equivalent dollar value. I say dollar, it may not actually be US dollar, it could be any sort of currency, and then they'll send it to those charities. I believe the charities, off the top of my head, I think it's Doctors Without Borders, and then there's one other, I think that's specific to Turkey. But they are highly rated from Charity Navigator, so you can know they're at least trusted charities at the time of them choosing them. And so CCP, the reason there's such a short turnarounds, right, so less than a week, is to try and get those folks the money ASAP because they're currently trying to find survivors, trying to get people safe, get them the supplies they need. So huge, devastating issue over in Europe / Middle East. And so CCP and EVE Online players are once again coming together to try and help. The other thing I want to throw out there, just in case, is scamming is not allowed related to Plex for Good. So do not scam anyone. If you think you've been scammed in Plex for Good, contact CCP and they will probably swing the biggest of hammers on whoever attempts to scam. So definitely feel free to try and do that. Also, this is the only time you could probably do like some weird wonky, hey guys, I'm going to blow up my Nyx or give away a AT ship for Plex for Good. This is probably the only time you can do that with any sort of credibility because then you have CCP's backing if you screw up, and don't do it because then they will ban you. So if you want some sort of credibility to try and run an event, you can do it, and then people will know that you cannot scam them. So that's also a good thing to do too. I've been talking with some folks trying to put money together, try and raise funds. So I'm actually really excited to see what comes of it.
Definitely. And typically it's very hard in a situation like this. And obviously we all want to help, and it's just, this is terrible, but typically I'm the first one to take real world events and patches and everything and try to capitalize from it inside the game, right? This is obviously, I don't have to say this, but it's obviously not one of the situations. And so the first thing actually I'm always concerned with when there's a Plex for Good campaign is that I hope nobody is trying to benefit in game by buying up all the Plex beforehand. And that's why I was telling my community, I was trying to myself to get out of the Plex market as soon as possible. And interestingly, one thing we saw, and we also discussed in my community, is there was even before the announcement came, somebody put up around 100,000 Plex at 5 million, which was a steal at that point in time. And if it wasn't for Plex for Good, I would have been, I would have immediately bought it up. And we were wondering where that came from, but it seems like, we discussed this earlier in the pre-show. But it seems like you have a speculation on where that would come from.
Yeah, so I've always heard that CCP will manipulate the Plex market. So we were talking about banned accounts earlier, right? So banned accounts remove ISK from the game, but they also remove assets, skill points, and then Plex if those characters are buying Plex. So from a market perspective, CCP, when Plex exists, it exists as a liability on their books because they eventually will owe someone subscription revenue, right? So they owe folks subscription, they receive that revenue, and they cannot recognize it until it's actually used. Well, if it's just sitting in banned accounts, that just ups CCP's liability. So what they end up doing is, as far as I know, is they'll put it on the market to help maintain the stability of Plex. And they do that because, right, Plex has real dollar value. It affects everything in their game. And they want some way to manipulate it without just, I don't know, inventing it from thin air or something like that. So
And it would make sense.
Yeah.
It would make sense if they did this outside of a Plex for Good campaign. Then I think a lot of people, especially people like me that trade on the market, would not like the fact that they're invisible handing the market there. But in this case, it totally makes sense. And because what would happen is you have to think of the Plex market through all the events that I've been calling Plexageddon of the last 6 months, where there's a massive sale on the New Eden store, and the only way you can take advantage of it, of the reduced Omega, for example, and everything, you need Plex. So these events have spiked the Plex market to it almost being empty on 2 or 3 occasions over the last few months. If you do a Plex for Good campaign and the reaction is huge and a lot of people want to convert their ISK to Plex, then immediately people would be buying out the market and the Plex price would rise, which would be a terrible situation in this case because it would just hurt the total amount of money being donated. So CCP has no interest in that. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a great opportunity for them to liquidate some confiscated Plex without anybody really being offended by it, because this is the one time where everybody wants the market to go one way, and that is down in Plex. Even though you might be holding a ton, I think in this case, it's going to recover anyway the next time they do a massive sale on the New Eden store.
Yeah. And so I think it's really good. I find it interesting when CCP manipulates the market. I think that's really interesting. But I think it's really good that CCP's like, hey, we have all this confiscated Plex. Instead of just tee-hee, it's all of ours now, they throw it back on the market to try and, encourage players to, buy it out, spend their money to then send it as a Plex for Good. So I'm really excited to see kind of the results of this Plex for Good campaign. I don't know how, I have a lot of Plex on my account. I think it actually comes from CCP. So I'm just going to turn around and just give it back to CCP in hopes that to have them donate it and whatnot. So I'm excited to see what the players can do.
Yeah, for sure. And it's good to see that the Plex price is holding. Artemis is showing it here in the background. It's holding, around 5 million, which, interestingly enough, that 100,000 Plex offer that I was mentioning earlier, it was gone about, I think, 30 minutes later. So I'm just hoping somebody bought it up for donating it, but we'll never know. I guess CCP knows in the background, and I guess if the price would take off too much, maybe they might jump in again. But yeah, somebody is selling Plex cheap in Amara apparently.
Yeah,
it looks like on the screen.
So before this Plex for Good campaign, I had kind of seen, I don't know if I want to say rumors or gossip, but it was kind of all through my EVE Online Discords, people kind of talk about, dang, Plex is so high. Do you want to talk a bit about that at all, Oz?
Sure. I mean, I think if you touched on this earlier about, what is Plex to CCP anyway in an economic sense. So CCP doesn't really, I know people like to say this, but they don't really benefit from a very high Plex price. There's also a lot of downsides for CCP when Plex prices are very high. So they're not actively driving it up. What did drive it up, of course, was the big subscription price change of last May, I think it was. If you're making subscription cost the same amount of Plex, but you increase the dollar value attached to it, what you're going to do in the end is you're going to drive up the Plex price. And that's exactly what has happened. What CCP tried to do or did to mitigate that is just massive sales. And that's those Plexageddon sales that I was mentioning. So they at one point in September, some of you might remember, they reduced the cost to subscribe from 500 Plex to 300 Plex, which, again, that's a great offer because it makes it cheaper for people to subscribe. But on the other hand, that is going to massively drive up the cost of Plex again, because everybody needs Plex to take advantage of this offer. So the reason that we've seen Plex prices spike so much but rise over the mid trend, I would say, is that we're having an increased sub price. We're not necessarily, with the exception for the uptick we saw in the November expansion uprising, we didn't see a lot of a huge influx of new players, and the influx of new players is typically what you need to also, because they are prone to buying Plex, to supplying more Plex into the market. That or large wars where people need ISK quickly, right? So they buy a large amount of Plex, and when you don't have Plex being bought from new players or from veterans for various reasons, then you just don't have the Plex supply resupplied quick enough for these offers to not every time spike the market and make it rise in the long term. I think 5 million is a fair price right now. What it is, right, in terms of the economic forces that we're seeing in EVE Online, 5 million is a price to be expected, and I don't see any reasons why the Plex price should be dropping a lot in the near future. The reason that I said a few months ago and a few weeks ago, and again, this was before Plex for Good this was before the earthquake even happened, I was telling people to invest in Plex for the simple reason that I think that CCP is going to continue to drop these sales, these massive sales. And so if you have some cash, some ISK cash on hand, and you put that into Plex, it's really easy to just wait for these sales to happen. Plex typically spikes. You can liquidate your Plex, you can make a profit on the side, and then wait for it to drop off again after the sale and then rebuy in. And that's actually a typical market move that I recommend to people doing right now, because I think that in the long run, it's not going to drop below 5 million. So unless something massive changes, and that is why I think that's a fairly safe bet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like when people talk about the economy, you always have to talk about Plex and what does that mean and how all these things that affect Plex, right? Because I feel like everything else in the game, like ships and ore and minerals, like all that stuff's affected by in-game things, whereas Plex is affected by so much. Yeah, so Artemis is showing Eve Marketeer or Eve Marketer. I don't know.
You can, I mean, you're absolutely right about the impact with Plex. It's not like trading other things in game. Like Plex is about a third of the total trade revenue that we're seeing in the game. It's by far the most massive item that is being traded, right? And so if fortunately or unfortunately, you can make massive amounts of and profit by trading in Plex, but it's so massively risky because you never know what is going to happen, because Plex is governed by real life events as we're seeing now. Plex is governed by these sales. Plex is also governed by new content being dropped, right? And by players coming back into the game, by wars being fought. So it's a much more meta investment into the Plex market. And I know a lot of people tend to, berate me or other traders for investing into Plex and trying to monetize Plex, but it's also part of the game.
I mean, I think when everyone goes to what do you call it, take a break from the game, a lot of times they just liquidate all their ISK to Plex, right? Because in theory, ISK can lose its value rather easily, whereas Plex will always have value. So even if you come back and you don't have a lot of ISK, you can use that Plex then to either get the ISK or you can just at least have a sub.
Yes. Yeah, the only way that in the long run Plex would lose its value is if nobody wanted to buy Plex, and that would mean just people aren't interested in the game. But in that case, you're probably not returning to the game anyway because nobody's interested in the game. Or if you, yeah, that's the only way that the Plex value would massively drop. Or if they drop the sub price back down from like 20 to 10 euros, which I mean, that's also never going to happen, because it was very hard for them to push through this change from 10 or from 15 to $20, at least for at the 1 month price. So I don't see them ever going back. They're going to do these sales on the side, but they're not going to drop back down. So yeah, I still think that it's a fairly safe and inflation-proof investment.
Yeah, so there's a lot of chatter in the Twitch chat I've been trying to look at. A lot of folks are talking about Plex and investment. Someone said to invest in supers because they're not getting any cheaper. And then they started talking about mining, which, I mean, mining's on the MER. I don't know if you want to talk about that. But yeah, Plex, I was fine.
Can.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe not mining. The one thing I'm curious about, so we had the Uprising event. We had new faction warfare. Has the MER reflected more activity in faction warfare and more people in faction
absolutely.
warfare?
Artemis, if you go to the first graph, and I go to this one, the production versus destruction graph, exactly this one. So this graph is great, by the way, also something that CCP Estimate introduced after that, because we can see here destruction versus mining versus production, and also how that is developing in each region of space. So in wormhole space, null sec and high sec, and low sec. And so if you see that graph there, Rahne, September, or that, and the lines between September and January is the November expansion, and you see that mining, or let's start with production. Production increased a ton around that time, and that's not only the expansion. So the expansion introduced new ships, which everybody wanted to build and fly. So that is one part of it. But this is also a 30-day moving average market price. So an increasing price in items also increases this graph. So we actually saw moon materials that had been slumping because nobody had been building anything in the tier 2 space, or at least not profitably. We saw those prices spike as well, because people were coming back, people were buying stuff, people were trying to build stuff. And so all of that compounded, you saw a massive, like I would say about 30% increase in production, and it's been holding fine. So we saw that increase from Uprising, and it's still going, and it's good, it's fine. If you're talking destruction, we didn't see that huge initial push, because it's not like we're introducing new ships and everybody starts building them. We're seeing destruction continuously increasing since Uprising dropped, and that, I think a lot of that is faction warfare. Yeah, you also have a nullsec war being fought. If you look on the right there, you can see that a lot of destruction, exactly, Artemis. A lot of the destruction is happening in nullsec. So that's part of it. But I think that's all contributing, and then a steadily increasing destruction line is just good for everyone, right? I mean, there's just nobody in EVE Online that doesn't like a continuously increasing destruction line, because that's great for traders, industrialists, and it looks like people are having fun, right? And so mining also increased similarly to the destruction graph. Yeah, we're seeing whole space had been increasing in mining. That's that sweet gas being mined there, but it clearly didn't increase as quick as the production graph up there. And so even considering the fact that we from this graph we can't really see what the impact of rising prices was on each of them specifically, still the fact that mining is not increasing as quickly as production means typically, and it does, we don't see that here, but you can trust me on that, it has been rising prices on raw materials, on moon materials, on minerals. And so without that mining graph increasing as dramatically, we will see rising prices. And we have seen rising prices, which I love as a trader. I love seeing rising prices. It's not great for the end consumer, which is your average player, I guess. Although everyone plays their role, right?
Yeah. Does that also mean, right? So I'm thinking back when people were mining moons, getting all this like PI, et cetera, but they weren't able to really use it to build anything. Does that mean people are maybe using their stockpiles and whatnot? And which is good for the game too, right? You don't want people just sitting on mass amounts of unused resources.
Absolutely. So there was there was a time 6 months ago when, for example, moon materials, they were almost worthless. I mean, nobody wanted to mine them, at least most of them, because they were just so low on the price level. That has changed. I mean, moon materials on average over the past, since Uprising dropped and since we saw some of those material changes in November, their price has increased like 20-30%. And this is slowly taking a chunk out of the stockpiles that everybody was building up. And so for the year before November, at any point in time, I hold about $1 trillion worth of moon material, just because I have a large, investment fund, and I have to put that money somewhere. So moon materials is a big part of the economy. So I'm holding it a lot. For a year, I couldn't interest anyone in that stockpile, and now I have people writing to me every couple of days saying, "Hey, we need more moon materials. Can we buy them?" And so that alone shows me that yes, not everyone has huge stockpiles anymore. We're actually seeing stuff being built, and moon materials have a worth again. And it's similar with minerals. We've seen specifically isogen and megasite spiking in price over the last weeks and months. So it's not just moon materials that are actually being reduced in stockpile, which is good, because I mean low prices aren't always great, right? Low prices are good for maybe people that are blowing up a lot of ships, but you have to think of the miners as well. So some people just like to mine, and if what they're mining is worthless, whether it's moon materials or basic minerals or gas, then their activity is not profitable either. And EVE is at its best when every part of the value chain is making money. And I think that we can all agree to that. So if people can have a way of making ISK in the play style that they like to play in, then that is EVE at its best.
Yeah, it's also, I think, just healthy overall, right? Because if you have everyone involved, like actually getting a profit of what they're doing in some way, shape, or form, then like ideally you have all areas of space being used, right? Because what you don't want is, I don't know, like high-sec mining to not be profitable. Then everyone leaves high-sec mining, and then when it's needed again, nobody wants to do it because like, no, last time I did it wasn't worth it. Blah blah blah. Kind of like we saw with Poshvin, where everyone left, and now we don't know if a lot of people are going back. Right? It's not overall good.
I mean, it's clear that CCP has understood. At least part of that is because they have been trying to relieve some of the bottlenecks in minerals. Like if you're looking at isogen specifically, they try to release more specific asteroid types, everything, but we're just not there yet. So I think there are still some bottlenecks in the industry that are not being relieved quickly enough. I mean, isogen as an example, I think CCP is trying very hard to get, I think, miners into low sec, and miners, I think, are just saying it's too risky overall. Other people can talk about that better, but the numbers that's what the numbers are saying. We really need a relief on isogen prices, because I think it's holding back some of the massive construction that could be going on, but it's not.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we're almost at the top of the hour. My cat says hello. It's very hard to see my screen. But so with the MER, was there, I would say, like when we're going into February, is there anything you're going to try and pay attention to, thinking with the economy in the next MER? I know we already talked about Plex a ton, but is there anything maybe that we didn't see any movement on this time around that you would have expected?
I think a fix of the import-export numbers in Pochven is one thing. Then sleeper loot, it's at a massive level. Like, are wormholes going to continue to be outputting that much money? And that, like, it's at a huge level. So can't wait to see where it's going. Those are I think two of the biggest ones. And then next month is actually one of the very interesting things that is happening next month is the active ISK delta. So if you think about everyone coming back in November and injecting the ISK that they brought back into the game, into the money supply, if those people logged in once and then immediately left again, then 3 months later, you would see that effect. And that's very interesting because we want to know if they're sticking around, and we will be able to see that in the next MER, at least some of it.
Yeah, so it's kind of expected to see at least a large increase in the delta? Whatever that the word for that
negative
is.
delta.
Negative delta, that's the word. Yeah. So I know we're kind of coming to the end. I'm gonna pause there. I know I've been asking tons of questions. Artemis, did you have anything on your mind?
I did not know, other than to say Oz does shows like this every week. So if you're enjoying this content, go check out their YouTube channel.
Thank you. Yeah, every Saturday evening, Eve time, so European time, I have a market chat show. About 2 hours, we talk about not only MER, but trading, the markets, the kind of stuff we talked about today. And right now, specifically last week, I started a new 0 to Omega challenge. Yeah, what you have on stream right there. This, people like to say that it's impossible to trade as an alpha, and every once in a while I need some excitement in my life, and so I start a very fresh alpha account, and I station trade it as quickly as possible to Omega, which is really difficult because you only have 17 orders per character, and your fees are horrendous. You pay like 10% fees on every trade, so it's very difficult. But I like doing it anyway, and I show it I do it live on Twitch in the evenings, and then I show it also on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/OzEve, you can look at some of those episodes. We're in the first week, so it's fun stuff.
How much time, like game time, are you spending playing?
This challenge is specifically designed to being done with 30 minutes or less a day, because as it is, I don't have any time. I have 2 kids and a job. I've been playing this game for a long time, but also I don't want people to do this sort of stuff full time, really, because it's more fun if you actually experience other parts of EVE. But you can do this to maybe I can help you get an account to Omega. I can help you make some money on the side. So this is designed to be very, very lean on time, and I show which tools to use, which strategies to use. I did the same challenge about 2 to 3 years ago, and it's also out there on YouTube. And there I was actually able to do it in 1 month. Right, in 1 month I went from 0 to plexing the account. Now the Plex price, and that's a good callback to our discussion earlier. The Plex price is so high that funding Omega with just this is just going to be that much more difficult. So I anticipate that this might take me 2 or 3 months.
I'm curious to see your results, because I've seen a lot of people do like a alpha to Omega challenge, but usually they're out in space, like doing some sort of PvE. So you staying in a station where that would be like what somebody could do while they're I don't know, working from home or whatever. Would be interesting to
exactly see. You just go on. It's I'm not saying do it in home office, but do it in home office. You just update your orders once a day on the 3 alpha characters, and that's all I'm doing. And you're exactly right, Rahne. People always log onto the Twitch and they're like, yeah, well, why don't you just run abyssals for an hour? You would be making more money. And I'm like, exactly, yes, but completely different challenge, because then I would have to A, teach you how to do abyssals, and B, you would actually have to actively do something in space. And this is something for the for the dads, the moms, the busy people, the home office workers that maybe just want to log in once a day, update orders, and then have some fun. Not only making ISK, but also you get to know EVE Online very well by getting to know the items that people trade in and the items that people fly. Why are people buying abyssal filaments? Why do people like compact multispectrum energized membranes, as you have on the screen right here? So it's a lot of fun, and it draws out a lot of questions from trading newbies, and it's just fun stuff overall.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was super informative. I'm gonna have to check that out sometime. Although I'm really bad at making money. I do none of this. it's easier for me just to buy Plex and sell it.
That's
Yeah.
one way.
Yeah. So we're kind of at the end. So winding down, do you have any shout outs? I know we've given a shout out to your YouTube and your Twitch. Do you have any other things you want to shout out or things you want to kind of, I don't know, friends back home or something like that?
No, all good. Come. Come see my stream on Saturdays, and I have my Discord has around like 6,000 people in it, which is a lot of trading nerds and other people in the EVE community. So, if you go to my Twitch or my YouTube, then there's a link to the Discord. So if you want to discuss trading, come there. There's a lot of people a lot of third-party developers that do trading stuff that hang out there as well. So if you want to give them feedback on their tools and everything, that's a good place for that.
That's good to know. Thank you. You can
So
link
shout out to the third-party developers in EVE Online, because there's a lot of legends out there that do a lot of great stuff. Like Adam for EVE, you for example, great place.
Yeah, thank you. They're like god tier amongst. I feel like I don't understand economy stuff, but I understand that way more than third party development. So, but yeah. So sorry, my cat says goodbye, everyone. But yeah. So with that, we will end the show. So this will be going up on YouTube for those who just joined or are missing.
Can I give a shout out from the void?
Yeah, Artemis. Yeah.
Lovely. The joys of being on staff is I get to pick when I talk about random VRs that no one cares about. So we had a fight yesterday, literally last night, and I was there, and it was a lot of fun. Shout out specifically to Arcia for FCing a lot of the fight, because our other main FCs kept getting headshot. But there's a civil war, if you will, going on between Tissue and the rest of Gal Mill, and of course Mimitar Militia is coming in to assist Galente Militia. So Tissue has declared a high-sec war deck versus some of the members of Galente Militia, and we're trying to kill the Astra House that's the War HQ. So Tissue is coming out with their high SP, high-value Vargur fleets. Previously, they were all like Dead Space fit, A-type reps, A-type enams, etc. And we are trying to work with lots of low skill point pilots who often can't even fly battleships. So this last brawl was literally multiple waves of a ball of Typhoons, 0 Logi, versus a ball of buffer fit Vargurs, also with 0 Logi, just seeing who could kill the other one faster. And it was an amazing time. It's probably going to happen again next week.
That is awesome. Yeah, we haven't talked about a VR, I think, in a couple weeks, so that's amazing. Alrighty, so with that, pay attention to Faction Warfare Space, pay attention to the market, and we will see everybody, I believe, next week. So take care, team.
Bye.